Hey, what's up, cats and kittens, and shout out to all my Cerebralites. It is me, the Cerebral Diva, and I'm back with another episode of RealiTEA, and that's TEA because I give it to you scalding hot. So grab your cups, grab your saucers, gather around, and let's all partake in this libation of RealiTEA. But before you go another further, do yourself a favor, and while you're at it, please do me a solid. Take a second, hit that subscribe button, and once you've done that, take another second to hit that tiny little bell so you can turn on your notifications, and that way you'll be kept in the loop. Okay, you guys, so please tell me you've been watching Growing Up Hip Hop. Now, I know you might be ashamed to admit it publicly, just like me, but I actually started watching the show maybe about a week or so ago. I think they're on episode 5 or 6, but I started watching it about a week ago. I binge watched all of the episodes. Initially, I became interested based on the drama between Toya and Tamar when Tamar called Toya Paperback Toya, which to me is still one of the best reads of 2017. So that's what really started me to watching the show, because Reginae jumped into the beef with Tamar and Toya to defend her mom, which I completely understand. But that got me wondering, who is this little girl? So I tuned into the show, and I see all of this drama transpiring between Reginae and Brandon. Now, Brandon's about 4 Reginaes, so he's a little intimidating to her, but the little girl she was 17, I guess, at the time that they were shooting, because the most recent episode, it was her 18th birthday. But I find it very interesting that I don't really give her a pass, and I'll tell you why. If Reginae were the sort of typical 18-year-old, 17-year-old who grew up sheltered and not really exposed to the things that I'm sure she's been exposed to, then I would see her as 18. But Reginae is advanced, and you can see that in her disposition. You can see that in terms of the way that she handles conflict. If no one told you she was 18, you would probably think she was at least mid-20s. Not that she necessarily looks older, but just the overall way by which she carries herself. She carries herself in a much more advanced age. At least on the surface, she does. Now, when she and Brandon got into their initial altercation, Brandon was managing Zanique, who is T.I. and Tiny's daughter. T.I.'s stepdaughter, Tiny's biological daughter. Brandon was managing her, and Brandon's a very sort of acrimonious manager. He's very hard. I mean, he has a very strong personality. He definitely has that. And it was one that Zanique had an aversion to. So she's shooting this photo shoot, and I guess Reginae is doing the styling for the photo shoot, and Brandon was really critical because he thought that it was hypersexual, the attire that Zanique was wearing. And I actually agree with him. I just thought it made her look a little thottish, if I'm being completely honest. So he was voicing that as her manager, and because Reginae was the one doing the styling, she took offense to the fact that Brandon was critiquing her skill set. And so the two of them started going back and forth. And ultimately, she was offended and she stormed out. And he told her some stuff about, I could have helped your dad's career. And, don't worry about this, worry about Black Lives Matter. Being that Lil Wayne was sort of very dismissive about the Black Lives Matter movement. And he and T.I. got into an online altercation about that. So Brandon sort of threw that up in her face. And she was not here for it, and so she calls her mom, and she's telling her mom everything that he said. And this is where I think good parenting comes into play. Because the one thing, like, I can understand Toya wanting to support her child. I understand that 100%. But at the same time, you have to teach your child some life lessons. And I think that Toya just took Reginae's word and did not necessarily understand exactly what had transpired, because I'm not giving Brandon a pass either. I do think that Brandon's his cadence, his intonations, his inflections can be very condescending and very snide, so I can see why Reginae would be offended. But at the same time, if you're not there as a parent to see what happened, and this man didn't threaten her physically, didn't threaten bodily harm, didn't get up in her face, point his finger and get physical with her, you should know, based on knowing your child, that this girl can be pretty flippant in her own right. So I think that Toya just sort of supporting what she was saying without having a clear understanding was bad parenting. So she gets on the phone, she calls her mom, and she's telling her mom, this man did this, and he looked like he wanted to fight me, and, blah, 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 blah. And so Toya, is basically buying into what Reginae is telling her. So fast forward to maybe episode 4, and Toya and Deb Antony, who is Brandon's stepmom, godmother, I believe. They have an exchange, and Toya gets a little snippy with Deb, and much to my surprise, Deb held her cool, and they agreed to disagree and sort of walked away from that, and didn't want their families to necessarily be at odds. It was the Montagues and the Capulets, the Hatfields and the McCoys, if you will. So they were trying to prevent some sort of family altercation from happening. So in the most recent episode that I've seen, it all comes to a head. So Reginae is having a birthday party. And in advance of her birthday party, she has a dinner party where she invites a couple of friends, and they all sit down. And so Bow Wow's there. Bow Wow's a story unto itself. I'm going to try to focus on Brandon and Reginae for this particular video, but I have to come back and talk about Bow Wow at a later date and time. So Bow Wow's there. Jermaine Dupri's daughter's there. I can't think of her name. I'm not sure why she's there, because to me she really doesn't bring a lot to the show. DJ Hurricane's daughter is there, who's Brandon's cousin. Who else is there? Zanique is there. Of course, Reginae is there, and Brandon shows up. And I think I'm missing someone, but I think that's pretty much all of the key players that were at the dinner. So Brandon walks into the dinner, and he walks over to give Reginae a hug, and she resists the hug. And you could tell, she was sort of on the fence about wanting to give a hug or not give a hug, because she didn't really know she didn't know what to do with the fact that he sort of broke that barrier as soon as he came through the door. So she was like, no hugs, no hugs until I get an apology. So they're sitting at the table, and she's telling Brandon she feels like he owes her an apology, and Brandon basically tells her, well, I would apologize if I felt like I had something to apologize for, and I don't feel like I should apologize for something that I think I'm 100% right about. And so that sends Reginae over the top. She's like, see, no, he's disrespectful. She walks out. You haven't worked with Rihanna, blah, 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 blah. No one knows who you are. And then she goes upstairs to get her cousins and tells her cousins that she wants to go down there and beat him up. And her mom comes down, Toya comes down, and they're all looking for Brandon. So they basically all surround Brandon in sort of this foyer at the hotel. Now, the one thing I find really interesting is that I think about maybe 2 years ago, a year and change ago, Toya lost 2 brothers to violence, to sort of this street thuggery that they're propagating on this show. And for her to be on one end crying about, I miss my brothers, and Reginae, how she misses her uncles, but to go out and actually help to continue to propagate or promulgate that sort of ignorance, it's beyond me, because this situation is a situation that could have definitely been handled, and ultimately it was. It actually was handled with words and not necessarily physical violence. But her 2 cousins came downstairs, and they were ready to sort of get buck with Brandon. And you could tell, if you watch the show, you could tell Brandon was a little intimidated, because it all came, it was like a deluge of Negroidian behavior, that just sort of an onslaught that just, he came around the corner and he wasn't prepared for it. So his female cousin is standing in front of him, sort of being the barrier or the buffer between Reginae's family and Brandon. So he takes off his coat, but he's not really posturing in a way that lets you know he's ready to be about that life. So meanwhile, Toya's 2 cousins are trying to get at him. And I'm just watching this scene, shaking my head, and Reginae's sitting over there, she's the puppet master pulling the strings, and she's really taking a lot of pride and pleasure in watching this potential violent episode unfold. And when I watch this happen, I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, see, this is what we need. It makes me so frustrated when we talk about things like Black Lives Matter, because I'm definitely down 100% for the Black Lives Matter movement. Let me preface what I'm going to say by saying that. But we are so quick to hurt and harm each other, it makes no sense to me. Over the most minute infractions. I mean, if this girl is grown enough to have an exchange with a grown man, you can't suddenly, because she's 18, and start invoking her age. Well, she's only 18. Oh, she's only 18. if she's talking like a 40-year-old, she's going to get dealt with like a 40-year-old. That's just the way it works. If you don't want her to be addressed in a certain way, teach her to stay in a child's place. She cannot get out of line and talk to adults as if she has no respect for anyone, but suddenly when that same thing happens to her in return, then she's a child. If you want to be a child, behave like a child. You can't pick and choose when you're a child and when you're not. And I think that that's what she's been doing. Like, she sort of plays this angelic role, where woe is me, how dare they, how could they do that to me, I'm just a kid. But at the same time, when she starts, going in verbally, she talks like a grown woman. So if I'm in a moment with her and she's talking to me like that, I'm telling you, the fact that she's 18 is going to go to the recesses of my mind. I'm thinking like I'm talking to a grown woman, and she talks like a grown woman. So Brendan's been talking back to her like a grown woman. And I'm sorry, guys. And that concludes this episode. So remember to like, comment, subscribe, and please share if you feel so inclined. Remember to follow me across all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. Also remember, it is better to be pissed off than it is to be pissed on. And it's always, in closing, people, remember to live better, love harder, and think smarter. It is me, the Cerebral Diva. I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great day, and as always, thank you for listening.